Welcome to the Republicans' best case scenario for the upcoming midterms, so let's start. So for the ruby red states, those are Idaho, Utah, the Dakotas of course. In Iowa, Chuck Grassley wins by a landslide of course. Missouri, Eric Schmidt win by a decent margin. Kansas, Oklahoma goes red. Arkansas, of course, Louisiana, Alabama, Kentucky, Indiana, South Carolina. All of these go red alongside Ohio, Florida, and Alaska that would go by a safe margin, so this would mean that Marco Rubio would defeat Val Demings by a landslide margin of more than 12%, so which could very well happen in a red wave case scenario. And now for Alaska, I think the ranked choice voting could very well be a problem, but assuming there's a red wave scenario where everything goes well for the GOP, that would technically mean that Chewbacca would be able to take a decent chunk of the votes and win in the end, even though it's ranked choice voting, but that's how it is in this scenario. And now for the race in Ohio. So Ohio is a state that has trended to the right in the past elections in its advance against Tim Ryan, and the polling has been quite meh, to be honest, but think if the economy crashes just before election day or something like that, this could very well be the map that comes in the end. So Ohio would be a advanced one of at least 12%, just like Florida and Alaska. And now for these safe Democrat states. First of all, for California, that would still be a Democrat win alongside these races. And in New York, it would still be a big win by Chuck Schumer because he's the incumbent Senate Majority Leader, and that would help him quite a lot. He's also big time in politics. While in Vermont, this race would be closer than other times, but I still see Peter Welch defeating Malloy by an easy margin of, in this red wave, it would probably be around 15-18% perhaps, but who knows really. I still think the Democrats would easily be able to win here, while for Maryland, it would still be a Democrat win for Chris Van Hollen, and he easily would win re-election. Just like Ron Wyden in Oregon, who would win here by, I'm guessing, similar margin to Vermont and Maryland. And now for the likely races for the Republicans, and now those would be Wisconsin. I see Ron Johnson easily being able to defeat Democrat Mandela Barnes, the lieutenant governor in Wisconsin, by, I think, a margin would be quite big for Ron Johnson in a red wave. And right here you can see that stuff. I think Ron Johnson would be close to getting around 8. I think a good respectable number would be, I think, 7 to 9% of the economy just dips down just before election day. I think that's where you would find it, almost being a double-digit margin. And now for the race in North Carolina, with Ted Budd having the Trump endorsement alongside all these things that would align for the Republicans, and he's going to face Cherry Beasley, it wouldn't be too outrageous to think that he would be able to win in a favorable year for the Republicans by a decent margin. I think in this sort of midterm, Ted Budd would be able to win here by a decent margin of, maybe I'm gonna say more to the right of Wisconsin, of course, 8 to 10%. I think that would be the best case scenario for the GOP in this race. And now moving along to the next race. So for Nevada, for this state, it's Adam Laxalt, one of the best Republican recruits, who is challenging Catherine Cortez Masto. And here you go, the polling. And even if there was no red wave, Adam Laxalt would be able to win in Nevada still. And in this timeline, I think Adam Laxalt would be able to win here by a likely margin of around 5 to 7%. I think Masto, even though she's the incumbent, she wouldn't lose as bad as other people, but Laxalt would still win here in this favorable year for the Republicans. And now for the likely races for the Democrats, let's start off for Connecticut. Yeah, Connecticut. And even though it's not talked about because it would take a red wave for it to get more competitive, it still should be talked about because, as you can see has gotten a lot of polling, and what I think, in a red wave scenario, it would definitely drop down to a likely margin. I think that is a fair take in this timeline, and I see Richard Blumenthal still being able to win, but it drops down from a safe margin to a likely margin of 10% to 12%. And for the last likely state for the Democrats in this video, that would be Illinois. In this cycle, it's Tammy Duckworth, the incumbent Democrat, who won in 2016 against Mark Kirk by a decent margin, and now in this midterm, she's facing off against Kathy Salvi, the Republican nominee this time around. And the polling, it's been a bit scarce, but as you can see, in a hypothetical scenario where all the undecided voters, almost all of them, go to the Republican because of some form of an economic recession just before the election day, you could see this this race would drop almost certainly down to a likely margin. I think Duckworth would be still able to win here, but she would only win here by 7 to 9%. Now, moving along to the lean races. So for the first lean race, that would be in Arizona. So in Arizona, in 2016, it was a huge win for the Republicans because McCain was the GOP incumbent, and now in 2022, incumbent Democrat Mark Kelly will face Blake Masters, and Blake Masters, and the polling you can see is already quite close to beating Mark Kelly and them, but still a long way to go. But in a red wave midterm, I see Blake Masters he would get close to winning by 5%, but I still see him winning here by a margin of let's say 3 to 5%, assuming the Biden-Mark Kelly coalition would not be as strong in these midterms. So I see this as an easy Blake Masters win. And now for the next one, for Pennsylvania, where in 2016 Pat Toomey won here by 1.4%. Now in 2022 it's Dr. Oz, the Republican nominee, against Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, and the polling has shown this to be quite competitive. As you can see, Dr. Oz is rising, and with the undecided voters and alongside a poor economy in this timeline, this would 100% mean that Dr. Oz would be able to win here. I think it would not be as much as Arizona, but I still see Dr. Oz winning here by a margin of 1 to 3%. And now for Georgia. So Georgia in 2016, it was an Isaacson landslide win of 13.8%, and now, just like in Arizona, the Democrat incumbent is facing the Republican. So it's Raphael Warnock against Herschel Walker. So this race would really come down to Brian Kemp basically winning by a huge margin and carrying Herschel Walker. So I think, assuming that would happen, of course, Herschel Walker would be able to win here by a lean margin of 1 to 3% because of Brian Kemp winning by, who knows, maybe a safe margin. But that's it for the lean races. So now for the tilt states, let's start off for Colorado, which was a Bennett win of 5.7%, but because Joe O'Dea is running a campaign similar to Cory Gardner, who won in 2014 by 1.9%, yeah, but lost in 2020, and what I think will occur in a favorable scenario for the Republicans, as you can see right here in Wikipedia, once again, the polling, yep, right here, I think what would happen is that he would be able to do quite well in the suburbs, Joe O'Dea, and would be quite close to winning, but just barely misses out on replicating Cory Gardner, and Michael Bennet and the Democrats barely win here by a margin of, I think, 0.75%, a high tilt margin. And now for the next race in New Hampshire, which was extremely close in 2016 and has barely won by 0.14%, and now 2022 she's facing Dawn Baldock, who was just endorsed by Tulsi Gabbard, by the way. But let's just go. And now, right here, polling-wise, it's not looking too good for Baldock, but in a favorable year for the GOP, I do think, just like 2016 perhaps, in some similar ways, I could see Baldock winning in a red wave, just barely by a tilt margin of 0.5%. And yeah, now for Washington. This race is incumbent Democrat Patty Murray, who won here by 18%, but now in 2022, she's in a much more of a tougher spot, and she's facing Tiffany Smiley, who doesn't have picture, but I did put it in the thumbnail. And the polling has shown this race to be really close compared to other times. And assuming all these undecided voters would go to Tiffany Smiley, it really would be a true toss-up by all means. I still think Patty Moore would be able to barely win here by a tilt margin because of how blue this Washington truly is like. But Patty Moore would only win here by a margin of 0.25% to 0.5%. So in a huge red wave scenario where everything is going well for the GOP, the Republicans win with 54 seats against the Democrats' 46 seats. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a like, join the channel membership, and as always, see you next time.